Penguin Random House Audio presents Blood on Snow by Joe Nesbo, translated from the Norwegian by Neil Smith. Read for you by Patti Smith. Chapter 1. The snow was dancing like cotton wool in the light of the street lamps, aimlessly, unable to decide whether it wanted to fall up or down, just letting itself be driven by the hellish, ice-cold wind that was sweeping in from the great darkness covering the Oslo fjord. Together they swirled, wind and snow, round and round in the darkness between the warehouses on the quayside that were all shut up for the night, until the wind got fed up and dumped its dance partner beside the wall, and there the dry, windswept snow was settling around the shoes of the man I had just shot in the chest and neck. Blood was dripping down onto the snow from the bottom of his shirt. I don't actually know a lot about snow, or much else for that matter, but I've read that snow crystals formed when it's really cold are completely different from wet snow, heavy flakes or the crunchy stuff. That it's the shape of the crystals and the dryness of the snow that make the hemoglobin in the blood retain that deep red color. Either way, the snow under him made me think of a king's robe, all purple and lined with ermine, like the drawings in a book of Norwegian folk tales my mother used to read to me. She liked fairy tales and kings. That's probably why she named me after a king. The Evening Post had said that if the cold carried on like this until New Year, 1977 would be the coldest year since the war, and that we'd remember it as the start of the new ice age scientists had been predicting for a while. But what did I know? All I knew was that the man standing in front of me would soon be dead. There was no mistaking the way his body was shaken. He was one of the fishermen's men. It was nothing personal. I told him as much before he collapsed, leaving a smear of blood down the wall. If I ever get shot, I'd rather it was personal. I didn't say it to stop his ghost coming after me. I don't believe in ghosts. I just couldn't think of anything else to say. Obviously, I could have just kept my mouth shut. That's what I usually do after all. So there must have been something that made me so talkative all of a sudden. Maybe it was because there were only a few days to go before Christmas. I've heard that people are supposed to feel closer to each other around Christmas, but what do I know? I thought the blood would freeze on top of the snow and end up just lying there. But instead, the snow sucked the blood up as it fell, drawing it under the surface, hiding it, as if it had some sort of use for it. As I walked home, I imagined a snowman rising up from the snowdrift, one with clearly visible veins of blood under its deathly pale skin of ice. On the way back to my flat, I called Daniel Hoffman from a phone box to tell him the job was done. Hoffman said that was good. As usual, he didn't ask any questions. Either he had learned to trust me in the course of the 4 years I had been working as a fixer for him, or else he didn't actually want to know. The job was done, so why would a man like him trouble himself with that sort of thing when what he was paying for was to have fewer problems? Hoffman asked me to go down to the office the next day. He said he had a new job for me. A new job? I asked, feeling my heart skip a beat. Yes, Hoffman said, as in a new commission. Oh, okay. I hung up relieved. I don't really do much more than commissions. I can't actually be used for much more than that. Here are 4 things I can't be used for. Driving a getaway car. I can drive fast, that's fine, but I can't drive inconspicuously, and anyone driving a getaway car has to be able to do both. They have to be able to drive so they look just like any other car on the road. I landed myself and 2 other men in prison because I can't drive inconspicuously enough. I drove like a demon, switching between forest tracks and main roads, and I had long since lost our pursuers and was just a few kilometers from the Swedish border. I slowed down and drove in a steady, law-abiding way like a granddad on a Sunday outing. And we still got stopped by a police patrol. They said afterwards that they had no idea it was the car used in the robbery and that I hadn't been driving too fast or breaking any of the rules of the road. They said it was the way I was driving. I have no idea what they meant, but they said it was suspicious. I can't be used in robberies. I've read that more than half of all bank employees who experience a robbery end up with psychological problems afterwards, some of them for the rest of their lives. I don't know why, but the old man who was behind the counter of the post office when we went in was in a big hurry to develop psychological problems. He fell to pieces just because the barrel of my shotgun was pointed in his general direction, apparently. I saw in the paper the next day that he was suffering from psychological problems. Not much of a diagnosis, but either way, if there's one thing you don't want, it's psychological problems. So I went to visit him in the hospital. Obviously, he didn't recognize me. I had been wearing a Santa Claus mask in the post office. It was the perfect disguise. No one gave a second glance to three lads in Santa Claus outfits carrying sacks as they ran out of a post office in the middle of the Christmas shopping crowds. I stopped in the doorway to the ward and looked at the old man. He was reading Class Struggle, the communist newspaper. Not that I've got anything against communists as individuals. Okay, maybe I have. But I don't want to have anything against them as individuals. I just think they're wrong. So I felt a bit guilty when I realized that I felt a lot better because the bloke was reading Class Struggle. But obviously there's a big difference between feeling a bit guilty and a lot guilty. And like I said, I felt a lot better. But I stopped doing robberies. After all, there was no guarantee the next one would be a communist. And I can't work with drugs. That's number 3. I just can't do it. It's not that I can't get money out of people who are in debt to my employers. Junkies only have themselves to blame, and in my opinion, people should pay for their mistakes, plain and simple. The problem's more that I have a weak, sensitive nature, as my mom once put it. I suppose she saw herself in me. Either way, I have to stay well away from drugs. Like her, I'm the sort of person who's just looking for someone to submit to. Religion, a big brother figure, a boss, drink and drugs. Besides, I can't do maths either. I can hardly count to 10 without losing my concentration, which is kind of stupid if you're going to sell drugs or collect debts. That ought to be pretty obvious. Okay, last one. Prostitution. Same sort of thing there. I don't have a problem with women earning money whatever way they like, and the idea that a bloke, me, for instance, should get 1/3 of the money for sorting things out so the women can concentrate on the actual work. A good pimp is worth every crone they pay him. I've always thought that. The problem is that I fall in love so quickly, and then I stop seeing it in terms of business. And I can't handle shaking, hitting, or threatening the women, whether or not I'm in love with them. Something to do with my mother, maybe. What do I know? That's probably why I can't stand seeing other people beating up women either. Something just snaps. Take Maria, for instance. Deaf and dumb, with a limp. I don't know what those two things have to do with each other. Nothing, probably. But it's a bit like once you start getting bad cards, they just keep coming. Which is probably why Maria ended up with an idiot junkie boyfriend as well. He had a fancy French name, Muriel, but owed Hoffman $13,000 for drugs. The first time I saw her was when Pina, Hoffman's head pimp, pointed out a girl in a homemade coat with her hair up in a bun, looking like she'd just left church. She was sitting on the steps in front of Ritter Hall and crying, and Pina told me she was going to have to pay back her
Sample complete. Ready to continue?